think we're just waiting.
On me.
I don't know. There's 0 players.
Oh,
so if
we
you
have
guys
to.
wanna
Yeah,
put
I
your
see. I see.
Nicknames in.
Connecting.
So sorry.
Ah, there we go. Oh, that's what we're going for. Alright.
True. Make notes.
Oh, come on.
Dang it, Hyder.
What? Oh.
Halloween names!
Oh, okay.
Go back.
You can take yours out.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Chocolate.
I didn't see like that thing that you guys had going on, so I can be spooky.
What's another like spooky person?
No sure I
Michael
too.
Myers.
No
Mike
spring.
It's like really dramatic music.
Okay, let's get started. So this is similar to the true-false questions that we had before. The only options you have are true and false. There's not 4 options, there's just 2. I think you only have 20 seconds. So once the Louisiana Purchase Treaty was made, Americans were allowed to move west immediately.
Ooh,
Ooh.
I just got chills.
So
Sorry.
we got Count Chocula in the lead.
That's ridiculous.
The Louisiana Purchase led to Midwest Indians selling their land and moving to the Great Plains.
Oh crap.
Ah, mine wouldn't go.
Good. Still Count Chocula, Frankenstein. The money used to purchase Indian lands was given in full to the tribes.
Yeah, this is a little easier to see as the fastest one.
Man, we good.
We ain't missing none of
Yeah,
these.
you guys are fast. Jesus.
Didn't come here to lose, guys.
We're trying to get
These
home.
Indian tribes believed that in the idea of time being a linear construct.
Wait. Why'd you put true on the right? Can we start over?
Come on.
Oh, let's see who got that one right.
I'm up to the lead.
Oh, knew it. I knew it'd be you.
Gender roles were uneven between, I guess, males and females. One group was seen as more important than the other.
Oh, God, put it on the wrong side again. Oh. Good job, McKenna.
This is funny. This is not funny. This is
Oh,
horrible.
Hyder, you made like a miraculous comeback. So I didn't
How many more
But
questions
still,
are
it's
there?
irritating.
Yeah, I took the crap.
The tribes in Nebraska were nomadic in nature.
I had a read for it. Where's that?
Oh, shoot.
What? I'm going home.
Hyder's still in the lead.
Hyder, can you
I
please
think
miss
Count
one?
Chocula will come back.
I just
Tribes
missed one
believed that there
actually.
was more than 2 genders.
Yes. Still in 3rd place.
Wow.
I'm still last, even though I got it right. What is this?
You probably didn't answer as fast.
You gotta answer faster, Drew.
Reservations were used as a form of social control.
Which side?
We have one more answer.
Did I not answer? Oh!
Oh no, what is happening? Okay, get out of there.
Frankens. Wait, I'm not.
There were 4 major Indian tribes of eastern Nebraska that settled and influenced the region.
I just gotta go. Oh, dang it. I just gotta go for it.
Last one out of the main groups that lived in eastern Nebraska all were able to stay on their sacred lands.
Wow.
Good job.
I still know.
Oh man.
Oh,
what?
man.
No comment?
How do you rate this Kahoot 1 star? Tell us how you feel sad. Wait, no, it actually took.
You came
I
out.
I know, it did for me too.
Oh well.
Okay. So and that's the end of the Kahoot, so you guys can always put the phones away if you want. So now we'll go into the lecture portion.
I'm already taking notes.
So, again, we're going to focus on the 4 tribes of eastern Nebraska, the Pawnee, Ponca, Omaha, and Oda, Missouri. And we'll stick with the same 5 W's, the who, when, where, what, and why. So we'll start with the Pawnee. The who was that they were a confederation of groups in southeast Nebraska. When, since all the tribes have the same creation stories of starting at the beginning of time, I kept my when to when they were officially taken off of their sacred lands. And so for Pawnee, that was in 1873 to 75, and they left willingly after settlers came in and were stealing a lot of timber for their own construction and kind of just poaching off of the land. And they mainly just wanted it for themselves for farming. But then also the tribe was being attacked from the north by Lakotas, mainly coming from South Dakota, especially during bison hunting seasons. And so, as you can see over here, they made like earth lodges, which is basically what it sounds like. It was made out of sod and dirt and mud, and they weren't very, I guess, movable. So that's where the semi-nomadic comes from. They had their own homes that they kept in one place, but then they did move seasonally throughout the year. But they always did come back to these homes. And so the Pawnee is here in yellow. It made up the majority of Nebraska, so they had a lot of influence on a lot of our agricultural regions. Next is the Ponca, who was related to the Omaha tribe. And they were around the Niobrara River, so they were up in the northern part of the state, just not this little section right there. But they were removed in 1877 by forced march to Oklahoma, mainly because settlers, again, wanted that land for farming since it was right there by the river. It was very fertile, and it also had that good source of water. But then, as you can see, they were a little bit more nomadic since they had a lot more teepees than the earth lodges, but then they were also big traders of horses once those came down from the north and up from the south. They actually did a lot of horse raising and selling and trading, but then it also kind of revolutionized them because then it made them a lot more mobile, and it also upped their warfare. Next is the Omaha. They were a faction of the Ponca tribe that is still present today. So they were once connected, but then they kind of broke off into this kind of eastern portion. And they were the only tribe that was able to stay on their reservation because they were seen as the most civilized. They made it a point to interact with Americans and to trade with them and to learn from them and to intermarry with them. But then they were also able to stay because they sold a portion of their land to pay for the remainder of it. So it was actually like a little corner that was down here that they sold off because it was so fertile, and that helped pay for everything else since the land was going for so cheap. But then they also were able to stay because they were backed by prominent people from Washington, D.C. that pleaded their case and kind of supported them from the outside. But then again, they were also more nomadic compared to the Pawnee, just because they had the teepees that they used more frequently than the earth lodges. And last is the Oto Missouri. And they were a combination of two groups that formed during the forced movement west. So they were down here in this kind of southeastern region. If you know your counties, that's where Oto County is. But they were removed in two waves in 76 and 81 after the land was sold to speculators and Indians were relocated to Oklahoma. Again, it was one of those things where it was either sell or die off just because of disease and trade and competition for resources. It was easier for the survival of their peoples to leave. But yeah, so they weren't in the region as long as groups like the Pawnee and the Omaha and the Ponca, but they had a large impact on the region nonetheless. So then the what? And the what is kind of what these four groups are, what makes them similar, and that is that they have the cyclical time tracking. So it wasn't linear. Their time didn't start January 1st and the year just went on from that, whether it snowed or whether it was sunny that day. Their time was more cyclical, so that meant it was more nature-based. It could have been the first geese flying, the first sign of melting snow, the first deer that they saw. It was just it was more that nature aspect, which really became a problem once they were forced off of their lands, because if you're in one region and you're waiting for the snow to melt and you move to another region and you have no idea that you should be looking for the geese to start flying, it messes up your entire kind of year basically. They are semi-nomadic, so that meant that in the spring when their year started, they would plant their crops and start prepping for leaving the area, and once they planted their crops, got that all settled, they would then move down kind of towards the western part of Nebraska, eastern part of Colorado, and that's where they followed the bison, and they did a lot of hunting there. They were very nomadic over there. They didn't just stay in one area. They moved around following those bison herds, and then once fall arrived, they were again looking for those environmental changes, and then they went back to their original areas. So they were able to take the meat with them, they were able to harvest their crops, and they were able to store all of that food, keep it dried, keep it through the winter, and it actually kept their diets pretty regular. So then they were both hunter and agriculturalists, depending on the time of year. They were highly religious with their own sacred sites, items, and rituals, which was another reason why moving them off of their land was so difficult, because their sacred sites weren't marked. They didn't have markers. It was just an area that they kept untouched, and the fact that settlers just came in and just kind of stomped all over it was very insulting to them. But then they also had sacred items that Americans actually took and put in museums because they wanted to kind of just keep it safe, is what the argument that they used, but really it just took their culture and showcased it basically. And it wasn't until the 1900s that they actually got those items back from the museums, even though these tribes were still present. And it wasn't like they died off and they were like trying to keep the memory alive. It was really just kind of took their culture. And then eventually all the groups were affected by Americans, whether it was through trade or violence with the increased warfare, epidemics, since a lot of the animals in the trade coming from the east into the western portion of the Great Plains was carrying diseases that they weren't originally exposed to, as well as alcohol, which it was great for trade, but it became a big dependent item for them. But then also greed, just kind of taking advantage of the fact that Native Americans didn't understand the same concepts like ownership. They believed that they were one with the land, they didn't believe in owning it. So it's just kind of that taking advantage of them was kind of the same throughout every group. And then the why, of why it's important that we recognize the influence these groups have had. And so the first is the environmental impact. Not only their farming practices that we still use, like the slash burning, so when the crops are done and you're trying to refertilize the ground, burning out all that old foliage kind of. But then also animals, they kept the populations pretty steady, and by taking them out, they either forced other populations to move on, they forced some populations to get too big because then their natural predator was gone. And then in other cases like the bison, which we all know of, it completely devastated other populations just because of the overhunting that the Indians hadn't originally been participating in. There was also the cultural impact, like the assimilation and forcing kind of American ideals onto Native Americans. But then there's also the mixed families of Europeans marrying Native Americans and creating those mixed cultures, mixed values. And it resulted in like mixed languages, things like that. But then also the reservations, which caused a lot of social issues because it confined them to one area. It was like saying, you're free, but we don't want you in our area. Stay in your own bubble. And then kind of the lasting impact of these areas still have high poverty. They suffer from alcoholism. Some places still have water shortages. They don't even have running water there. They have low education rates. But then there's also things like high diabetes rates, high blood pressure, high infant mortality. And a lot of places, it's becoming an issue that's going off of the reservation. It's not just staying there with them. And so that's becoming a problem. So that's kind of the 5 W's. And so to put this into practice, I have the same module, which I thought we could try and survive this time.
Darn.
So let's see.
Okay, we got this.
So do we want to go through the prologue again?
No.
Or do we,
No.
no? Just go, okay, we're going straight to it. Do you want me to read it?
No.
No? Okay.
Stop.
I don't know if I read it or not.
Just kidding.
Lie.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, maybe you should read it.
Okay. You can see the herd best from the top of a small hill. So we're going to go to our hill where you can see the herd. As you get to the hilltop, your friend Crooked Rabbit rushes up to you.
I don't know this guy.
You kept teasing me.
Little fox, come. There is a problem.
What is it? Or do we want to tease him and say, did your shadow frighten you again?
Did your shadow
Jeez.
Does that feel like a shadow?
Damn.
Listen, including your uncle's favor. Did the crow have stolen that?
What do you think we should do? Is that as hard as you can hit? How will you ever become a crazy dog soldier?
Tease.
Don't worry. That is only how I punch small as well. If you're so brave, what do you suggest?
We should look for the horses ourselves. If they are just down the creek, we don't need to wake people. If it is Crow, we should find them and steal our horses back.
Well, now we know it was him, right? So maybe we should tell people, so find them.
So wake people?
No, that one says we don't
No.
need to wake people.
We should find them and steal our
Yeah.
horses back?
Yeah.
No. It would be better to go back and tell one of our chiefs. If they are Crow, even stupid Crow, they are warriors, we are boys.
That is wise. I will go back and find my uncle. You stay here and keep careful watch,
Yeah.
or you can be scared. I will go bring back our horses.
Hell no. Go get the uncle.
We acted wisely. Good. So we're gonna run back to our village. You see a shadowy figure crouching by your family's teepee.
Whoa.
He's right here.
Okay.
You approach the man, but he sees you and runs away. He looks like a Southern Cheyenne that recently joined your band.
Okay.
You should talk to your uncle in the other teepee.
Okay.
Is that you spell TP?
There we go. I
Yes.
Okay. Did you know?
I thought it was
T
T.
E. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's what I was spelled. Okay.
Uncle, 5 horses are missing. I think your favorite war horse is among them. Or I just saw a man whispering to my sister, calling bird.
I don't know.
What? I'd say 5 horses are missing.
Yeah.
Horses often wander off.
I did not check. I see now that I should have. I will go now. Or I did not check. Crooked Rabbit was worried that Crow had stolen them. I thought it was wise to tell you.
Tell him that one.
Yeah. Second one.
Second one.
Are you
Or is
certain?
Crooked Rabbit's imagination made you see crow that are not there?
I am sorry, Uncle. I do not know for sure. What should I do? Or I wanted to go looking for them, but Crooked Rabbit said we should ask for help.
Blame it on Crooked Rabbit.
Yeah.
You teased him too.
We ain't taking the
That
blame
is
for
a
this
good
one.
thing, if there's a chance crow are about.
Oh, also tell him about the man.
I'll tell you once if you do.
What should I look for? Or I also wanted to tell you that I just saw a man whispering to my sister calling bird.
Tell him about the girl.
That must have been Black Moon. He's a Southern Cheyenne and a brave warrior. He told me his plans to court Collinburg.
But it is not the Lakotas, many horses whom she will marry. I understand. I will go look for the horses
Well,
now.
ask him about the other guy. This is dirt.
And many horses has great wealth. He is a good choice, but it's better for your sister if more than one young man presents himself.
Okay, that's too
Who
much
do you think she will
information.
choose? I understand. I'll go look for the horses now.
Let's just go look for the horses.
Oh, we have lots of tasks. Okay, so where do you guys want to start? The horses, or looks like a river of your trees?
Horses,
Yeah.
I guess.
This is where most of the horses are, and where you last saw your uncle's horse. It is still dark, but the moonlight helps you see. Search among the horses for signs of the crow, or search the surrounding area.
What did we do last time to find a footprint?
I think we searched for signs of him.
Girl. And then he found the footprints? Yeah, let's
Oh yeah.
Search for signs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just have to prove that he stole them and then tell the uncle. What? Oh, well, you're over 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, did you guys want to continue?
doesn't matter. Just try to get us killed.
Yeah.
Well, we know he'll die.
Well, I guess you could say from this, even though it's not one of the 4 tribes that were in eastern Nebraska, they still were in Nebraska, but they were more northwestern in that kind of panhandle region. But then this kind of shows you they focused on trading of horses. It did bring about warfare between the groups, but then it also kind of went into their kind of dating, courting kind of practices, and also their language, kind of how they name each other. So it kind of touches a lot of topics. So you can end that one.
Okay.